Good morning, loves. It is 5 minutes to 12. It is another slow-moving foot morning, but and I have my pumpkin spice latte for the first time that I was going to write about in the room, but I was already off the computer. I'll put that up there today so you can see it. I shared it on social media. I'm all propped up here today. I have always been a huge pumpkin spice latte person. This time of year, it's what I looked forward to. And years ago, in the days when I went out more, and I would go to maybe Starbucks, which is near me, and just take my writing and a book, and I would sit and have a pumpkin spice latte and write. I'm a person who wrote in cafes her whole life until within the last 20 years, I just kind of stopped going out entirely. But then if I would have to go out, like to therapy or something, which is also very near me and very near the Starbucks, I would drive through the Starbucks on the way home and get a pumpkin spice latte. Well, the thing is, the pumpkin spice lattes, I guess always were, but for my budget, when it got to this point that it is, they were just too expensive. So then I found in the grocery store, you know how they have the flavored coffee creamers. I got the pumpkin spice latte coffee creamer, and I loved it. Of course I loved it. It was loaded with sugar and all kinds of, pardon me, crap, but it sure was good. And then 3 years ago, in October was my 3-year anniversary on the ketogenic diet. Though I did fall away, not away, but I did have a lot of slips in the early months of COVID. I'm back to very strict diet. But since I stopped having even a glass of wine in the evening, because it doesn't go well with my medication. I wouldn't feel right. I don't drink much, but it doesn't take much. I mean, it doesn't even take a whole glass of wine with this medication I'm on to make me feel off. And it's a good thing I don't, because, I mean, I would have probably taken all kinds of falls if I had kept drinking wine on the medication. So what that leaves me to is what I mostly drink is water. I drink a lot of water. And I've always got, let's see, one of these big bottles beside me, and I put electrolytes in the water. And I drink a lot of water. I drink some seltzers and some flavored sugar-free seltzers, and sometimes I make some tea. I've gone through phases in my life, but I'm not so much a tea person now. I had a cup the other night. If I'm in a tea-ish sort of mood, I make matcha, and I'll make a matcha latte, which is really good. But it's that time of year. And I've long heard from people about these, well, I say on Amazon, because that's mainly where I shop, besides grocery stores. Since I don't leave the house, I get just about everything on Amazon. They have by a company named Jordan's Skinny Syrups. Comes in a tall bottle, kind of like if you went to Starbucks or a coffee shop where they have the big bottles of flavoring. Well, Jordan's has the flavorings, but they're sugar-free. People rave about them. They have a jillion positive reviews on Amazon, and they come in so many flavors you can hardly count. They come in several pumpkin flavors: pumpkin spice, pumpkin caramel, pumpkin cheesecake, pumpkin something with nuts in it. I'm allergic to nuts. For some reason, I can eat almonds if they're roasted, but I can't eat any other kind of nuts. So I don't want a nut sort of But anyway, I've never ordered it, as good as it sounded and as good as the reviews were, because it's sweetened with sucralose, which is essentially Splenda. I don't use artificial sweeteners. I don't like the aftertaste, and they're not good for you. I stopped drinking diet sodas when I went keto too. I've had like a diet soda just a few times during the COVID time. But I don't drink wine, and I don't drink any alcohol, and I don't drink anything that's special. And having a cup of coffee in the afternoon, a pumpkin spice latte, just sounded grand. So I ordered the pumpkin spice flavoring, sugar-free, from Jordan's from Amazon. It's really not expensive. It comes in a great big bottle that'll just about last forever, more than this holiday season. So I got it. And I made my first one yesterday, and it was gorgeous. I'll put it in the room just for fun. And it is so good. The pumpkin spice flavor of it is every bit as good as anything I ever got at Starbucks. It is so good. It is fabulous. It is an incredible treat. The only downside for me is it does have that, but just a little, just like a slight little, you can tell it's sucralose. I use, like in my morning coffee that I'm having now, I use monk fruit sweetener, which is the best natural sugar-free alternative that it took me 3 months when I started keto and had to, no sugar, no sweetened creamers, no, and I tried stevia and oh my God, stevia in coffee is awful. I know some people have it, but I think it tastes terrible in coffee. It's okay in some other things to use a little bit for a sweetener if you've got like the powdered kind or erythritol. These are other natural sweeteners that are sugar-free. But I tried several in the first 3 months on keto, and when I finally landed on the monk fruit sweetener, that was the best. The one I get's by a company called Lakanto, Lakanto, and I get it, of course, from Amazon. But it looks like sugar, and you use it like sugar, so that's here's my morning latte. Foam lip. I'm just going to hold that right here because it's cold this morning. It's chilly, and it feels good kind of chilly. I couldn't believe when I went to let Molly out. Of course, it was like this yesterday morning too, so it is fall. It is November. But anyway, so I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to have it in the afternoon, to have a pumpkin spice latte, and it's November, and it's the perfect time. So and they have a jillion. When we're past the holidays, I've always loved like hazelnut flavor in coffee. So I might try hazelnut after the holidays. You just use a teaspoon or tablespoonful. You don't use much. But anyway, there is something I wanted to share with you today. Please forgive me. I have to take another a sip of coffee. Foam lip. Okay, I'll put it down. I have a couple of books I want to share with you. They're by the same woman. And I bet some of you know her. I was introduced to her by my therapist nearly about a year ago, who said, "You have to read this book." It is by a woman, I'm going to tell you her name in a second, but it's by a woman who started a blog called Hyperbole and a Half. Does that ring a bell with you now? Her name is Allie Brosh, Brosh. Allie with an I-E, not a Y. Well, it's her blog got so popular and such a huge following. It is about living with mental illness. But she's funny, and she's a writer and an artist and a comedian. She wrote this book. It became a runaway bestseller, and then she completely disappeared for like 6-7 years. She stopped doing her blog. Her book was such a gigantic hit, but she just disappeared. During that time, she had very difficult mental health issues, including, I've read, suicide. I don't know if they were attempts or thoughts, but she struggled with that. Well, over the summer, I read that she had a new book. 7 years later, after Hyperbole and a Half, she came out with her second book, I pre-ordered it like in July, and I just got it a few days ago, so I haven't started reading it. Very much like Hyperbole, but look at this. Hyperbole and a half. Unfortunate situations, flawed coping mechanisms, mayhem, and other things that happen. Now, these are the characters that she drew. This is Allie. This is her rendition of herself. And people said, and this is her hair, you see. And so she said, people ask her, where in the world did you come up with that hair? And she said, well, I kind of think of it like a shark fin. But it's like a graphic memoir. You see, so, I mean, this was long before I even started drawing Maisie. And now I realize it's a good format for me to study. Here's the book inside. So there actually is a fair amount of text. As you can see, there's pages where there's more text. There's pages where there's no text. It deals with the deepest, most touching, sometimes sad, very real, and all throughout very funny books. So I've read Hyperbole. I want to read it again before, because it's been a while before I start. This is her next book, Solutions and Other Problems, from the New York Times best-selling author. Solutions and Other Problems. So I have these books, and I pulled them out again last week when Solutions came. I pulled out Hyperbole and a half again because I want to read them, but then I got intrigued and I looked on, I'm spending a lot of time on YouTube these days, and there have been wonderful interviews with her. She's just a hoot and quite a character, and very honest and kind and transparent. So she's been interviewed now by a lot of people, but I couldn't believe it when I saw the newest interview out on YouTube, and it's over 2.5 hours long. It's like, I probably watched close to 2 hours last night, because I had finished watching one before that I hadn't finished. But the reason that this is so intriguing is for the first 45 minutes of the interview, it is between she and one of my favorite writers, Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love and so many other books. I love Liz Gilbert. Not just for her writing, but she's a really, I mean, I follow her on Instagram. If you follow her on Instagram, she just writes the most amazing posts. She's just incredible. So here they are, Allie Brosh and Liz Gilbert in conversation. Liz just raved to Allie. She said, we have been waiting, all of us who love you so much, and like all kinds of famous people. And I forget who she named, but really very famous people, and everybody all around, and fell in love with Hyperbole and a half. And she has a loyal following. It was so much fun to see she and Liz Gilbert. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, oh my goodness, pardon me. I'm also excited that another one of my favorite writers, who writes also about mental illness, but is very, very funny, and I adore her. Her name is Jenny Lawson. I bet some of you have heard about her too. I follow her on both Facebook and Instagram. But I cannot remember how I came across her books to begin with, because I have all 3 of her books. And it's been some time since I read the last one, because it's been some time since she wrote the last one. Not like 6 or 7 years like Allie Brosh, but it's been a while. But Jenny Lawson is coming out with another book, and I can't remember if it's going to be out in January or whatever, but it's very exciting. I'm also very excited because just about at the top of my list, my 2 favorite writers today, Anne Lamott and my beloved Natalie Goldberg. I bet a lot of you have heard of Natalie. I bet you've read at least Writing Down the Bones, which came out in 1986, is like the all-time best-selling book on writing ever. It's a Zen approach to writing. And that book came out in 1986, and I actually studied with Natalie in person twice. I went in 1988 to a 3-day workshop with her in South Carolina, Furman College. I think it's Furman. I think that's the way you pronounce it. And Natalie and I really hit it off. And she called me in January to say that she was going to do a workshop where she has done and does do most of her workshops. She lives in Santa Fe. She has moved back, well, she moved back to Santa Fe, but she lived for most of her time in Taos. And she has a house in Taos and in Santa Fe. But in Taos, there is an unbelievably, incredibly beautiful place now called the Mabel Dodge Lujan House. And Mabel Dodge Lujan was very, very well known in, I'm going to say, the early part of the whether it was like the 30s, 40s, 50s. I mean, D.H. Lawrence stayed there and wrote. Willa Cather wrote Death Comes the Archbishop, I think, in one of the rooms there. I stayed in the Willa Cather room. It is this huge, sprawling new place in New Mexico in the mountains, and it is breathtaking. So I was there for a week-long workshop with Natalie in 1990. And ever since then, I mean, I couldn't, I got to where I didn't travel and didn't have the money anyway. But I have all of her books. She's now written a lot of books, like 14 or something. Sometimes they're on writing, sometimes they're memoirs. She wrote one novel. But Natalie Goldberg is coming out in December with a new book. It's a book about haiku. And she is a very serious Zen student and teacher, and she studied with a very famous Katagiri Roshi for a number of years and lived in his, I don't know, not retreat house, I forget what you call those places, but and she said, while everybody thinks about Writing Down the Bones as a book on writing, which it is, it's very Zen. It's all about Zen. And she said when she was writing Down the Bones, or struggling to write it, Katagiri Roshi said to her, you don't need to keep doing meditation. Writing is your practice. And it was. She continued to do both, of course, and she's also a painter. But through that, she began to develop what she calls writing practice. A lot of people use that. I have used writing practices, but I think Natalie may have been the first one ever to coin the word writing practice. They are timed writings. They might be 10 minutes. They might be an hour. But that book, if you want to buy one book on writing and you don't have it, get Writing Down the Bones. You can get a cheap paperback copy on Amazon. And these are the two writers whose books I have in paper, she and Anne Lamott, in paper and also on Audible, because they read their books themselves. Natalie has a Bronx, New York accent. That's where she was raised. And then Annie Lamott, who I think I talked about the other day, wrote a number of novels, which I really haven't read, but then what she's mainly written for a very long time is nonfiction. And she wrote also a book on writing called Bird by Bird, which is wonderful. But since then, she writes nonfiction books. They're centered in faith. She was a late-come Christian, and she she's definitely a believer, but she has some funny ideas about the belief. She's not a, I don't know, she said she was 5 minutes away from slapping a fish on the back of her car. She is hysterical, absolutely hysterical. And she's written several books. She's coming out with a new book in March. And I love her books so much. I listen to them over and over and over. When some of her nonfiction books, because I love to hear her reading her own writing, her own stuff. So anyway, goodness gracious, it's 20 minutes, so I will stop here. But I really wanted to share Allie Brosh's books with you. And if you are a writer or love writing, Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones is a must read. And like I said, you can get a cheap copy of that book, and a cheap copy of most of Annie Lamott's books you can now get cheap on Amazon used. So anyway, my loves, it is Tuesday. It is election day. Everybody say a prayer and hold a good thought. I hope the outcome of this election is better than the last one. All right, my loves, I love you all. I hope you've had a wonderful coffee or tea today, if you're not already having one with me right now. I'm late moving. It is 12:16. So my coffees are when most of you are having lunch, and it'll take another half hour to upload it. But anyway, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the room. Bye-bye.